All right, welcome. So this is going to be the training for the Veterans 2022 Notice of Funding Availability. And with that, I think everything's displaying correctly. So if not, let me know, stop me short. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and move on. Just my keys here. I might have to. There we go. So agenda is to run over the training format real quick. That'll be brief. Reiterating some important dates, maybe some tips for those, and then the Veterans Nofa. I want to highlight some changes for this year, and then funding sources, just run over those just for understanding. Then there's the Nofa application process. Talk about the Perform Work Centers, how those are supposed to work for submission, and then talk about the Nofa charge submission. It seems to be that we have a process that's not going to change, and this is how it is for until someday it will change. And then we have the administrative threshold review, and I'll talk in broad strokes about that, kind of what to expect after the applications have been submitted. And then lastly, I'll go ahead and run over scoring overview. I'll cover all of the scoring, but I'll also talk about and highlight where things are different this year from last year. And then just reiterate the frequently asked questions protocol that we use. And then lastly, any questions that you might have. And just kind of free form. All right, so webinar format. While not speaking, please keep the mic muted. Otherwise, as I said, if you would like to at any point stop me or slow me down, I know that I can have a tendency to kind of begin a thought in the middle of leaving folks behind at the start. So if at any point I do that, I think sometimes I'm just afraid to start too elementary, but without knowing exactly where you're at in kind of the process, and also without beginning at the beginning. Sometimes I do have a tendency to leave folks behind. So I like to kind of disarm and say, I'm aware of that. Feel free to stop me and ask me to reiterate or go over something else in more detail. Yeah, you can either do the raise hand feature, or you can also just do the play and ask a question. Pretty small group, and I will try to get your answers as best as I can today. And if I can't, then we'll follow up. All right, so we are past pre-application close date, June 30. The full application has been released on July 7th, so everyone should have access to all of the full application materials now. If there's any issues with that, if you don't have access to it, please reach out to us as soon as possible. The next date to look out for is the frequently asked questions stop date. We do stop taking questions at a particular point. The reason why is because the answers to the FAQs can have a substantive change to the NOFA. So we stopped taking those at a point prior to the due date, just because there's not a lot of time left to make large changes for a lot of projects. And so there's a point at which we kind of cut that off. If there are major difficulties still that are identified late, then on a case by case, we may have to additional outreach to update something, but hopefully that won't be the case. The NOFA due date is August 25th at 4 p.m. I'd just like to encourage everyone that you do not have to wait until August 25th to upload your application materials. You can upload them the week prior. If you find that over the weekend, because the 25th is a Monday, that there is, something detrimental in the pro forma that you need to update, you can still make those updates and you can upload it again. If you choose to do that, I just ask that you do not change the file name. Don't version it like version 1, version 2, or the date. If you just re-upload it inside that software, it'll just automatically stack it right on top. The latest version is all we'll see initially. We do have access to see older uploads, but we're not going to use those for scoring or for anything else. It's just versioning wise, the software will do it automatically for us. All we will see is the latest update that you've uploaded. And so it's cleanest and best that way. So if you If you upload it the week before and then you make some minor changes and you want to upload a newer version, just keep the file name the same and just upload it again. And that's all we'll see. And so it's safer that way because occasionally people go to do something that's really urgent, got to have it in by 4, you're trying to upload at 3:55, the internet's not working. You can upload it and you can upload it again. All we will use for scoring is your latest upload and submission. The Nofa charges, so that has to be mailed separately. It can't be submitted electronically, unfortunately. So what we've come up with, because the post can just get weird and it's inequitable in the state of Oregon as to when those come in. So we've come up with a policy that it has to be postmarked by a specific date. And so for this Nofa, it has to be postmarked the same date that the Nofa submission is due, which is August 25th. For Nofa scoring through the end of August, but primarily in September, that scoring will take place. And then I am pretty confident that we'll make it to the October Housing Stability Council for recommendations. I'll say it's possible, if things come up that make it difficult, then we could go to November's, but I don't think that that's likely. And I think it's pretty likely that we'll go to October's. I haven't gotten this out yet, so this is kind of a first that I'm making this public. This is a pre-application report out. We didn't have a deep pool of applicants this year, so there aren't as many fields as we do have for other Nofa, if you're familiar with seeing those. And it's just simply because we would just either have 1s or 0s in some categories. So it's been distilled down to reflect what we could reasonably report out without kind of singling out projects for this Nofa. But as you can see, there are 6 projects total, 3 in urban and 3 in rural. Items probably of more important note or interesting note, I think, are the total requests for the VG HAP. I'll go over the funding sources in another slide, but it looks as if urban is currently oversubscribed and rural is undersubscribed. So there'll be some interesting dynamics there potentially as we get as we see who is able to submit the full applications. And I'll make this, I'll put this into a PDF and I'll have this released into everyone's work centers as well, so everyone has access to it. Veteran Nofa highlights and changes. So one thing that I want to highlight, it's not necessarily new this year, is that we're only allowing new construction or what we're calling conversion of existing structures. Conversion is technically acquisition rehab, but we're not allowing rehab of existing residential properties. We don't want displacement, and because of the nature of this funding, because it has to serve a specific population, we don't want that to either amount in that population not being served because the current tenant population, or because or see tenants dislocated. So we're only allowing new construction and acquisition rehab of non-residential structures. All subsidized units in the project must serve veterans. This is new for this year. So this specific language means that I'll try to come up with a scenario. So basically, instead of 100% or the entire project having to serve veterans as a set-aside population, if the project sponsor is able to come up with other sources of funding, basically there is what I call an applicable fraction of subsidy that's going into the project. So if it's a $10 million project and the project is requesting $5 million in veterans GHAP money, then essentially half of the units in the project would have to serve veterans, and the other half could serve other set-aside populations or just simply families or what have you. Another term that we use for this in OHCS is integrated projects. So that is new this year. We're allowing integrated projects. So it can serve all veterans exclusively, or it can serve an applicable fraction based on the subsidy being requested. We have made it that at least 30% of the project does have to serve veterans though. So we did stipulate that in that same section of 152. OHCS PSH rental assistance and services are available. That hasn't changed. That's the same. And then talking about the regional set-asides for rural and urban. So I have a typo in there. Oh, no, I don't. Sorry. The total amount available in this NOFA is 19,500,000. The set-asides for rural and urban are are equal. So the set-aside for both regions is 9,750,000. And then, yeah, there's actually quite a few updates in scoring, so I couldn't even fit them all here. It would be its own slide. So we'll go over those as we go over scoring. All right, more about funding sources. We covered how much is in the NOFA, and I just talked about what the set-asides were, the 9.75 each region. The subsidy per unit type limits is a little bit different this year. They come up with a separate category for homeless unit subsidy. So units that are identified in the application as serving homeless get a little bit of a boost in what the maximum or the capacity, the subsidy cap is. And so you can see the breakdown here by bedroom type, and it's 3-bedroom or above. So if there were a 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom, etc., it would just be that maximum of 360,000 for homeless or 300,000 for a non-homeless veteran serving unit. So that is a change. There's potentially greater subsidy there. It's both an incentive, but also recognizing that those units do need a little bit higher level of construction and just, yeah, those units typically just need more. Let's see. These are, I feel like I had one other thing I wanted to add to that, but it suddenly escaped my brain. We do allow PSH rental assistance and services funding in this NOFA. I actually have Dana on here to help me with that slide as we get to it. And if you have any specific questions about PSH, she's available to answer those. Similarly, I have Martin on to back me up with any questions about OHTC and how that operates. Yeah, I feel like it's going to hit me now. What was that again?
Can I ask a question about it right now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm very new to the affordable housing industry, so bear with me. We have a property, Dana, you know, Gus Chachas is who I'm working on this project with. And there's a portion of the property that does have an old building on it that could be rehabbed into like transitional homeless units. And I think we could use PSH funds for those units from what I understood.
No, not for transitional units.
It has to be permanent housing.
Yep.
Okay.
They have to sign a lease, a year-long lease, like you would in any private market or other affordable housing unit.
Okay. So this year we're applying for just VGAP, no PSH, because we're not ready. So that money though, like if we were to get it to build just the cottages on one portion of the property, next year could we later apply for PSH for that other building that could be used, or does it have to be in one with one grant? I don't know if I made
that makes sense. It's just it's kind of a tricky answer. So you can, the only way to ask for the rental assistance and services funding in isolation from development capital is through the PSH NOFA. And the PSH NOFA is reserved for teams, projects, and developers that have gone through the Supportive Housing Institute. So to be able to kind of tap into that NOFA and ask for those at a later date, your project or Gust or whatever other developers you might be working with has to go through the Institute. And we open up applications for the Institute around January, February.
Okay.
And that is a competitive process to get in the Institute, so it's a little sticky for sure.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if we could ask at a later date.
Just
I
through that
didn't know.
avenue. Yeah.
So you understood what I was asking. I asked the question horribly because I'm just so new at this. I'm trying to keep up with it all. So
No worries. That's a good question.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, the permanent supportive housing slide is the next one. Before I get into that, I have one other thought, and also, hello, Rose, just to kind of inform you also, so we have a pretty small, intimate group for the webinar, at least live. I'm giving the presentation, we're recording it in a format that'll be released, so all the other applicants could tune in and benefit from it at a later time. So I'm kind of talking to a larger audience. But the benefit for you being here is that if you have any specific questions you want to ask live or in a more one-on-one sort of setting, then you have that advantage of being here. Otherwise, we just have the FAQ process. And yeah, with that, we're just going through the presentation. For any parts that you may have missed, again, it's being recorded and it'll be released, so you can catch up with those pieces. I did want to mention also to be aware that there are two different definitions that you can that are in this NOFA, one being for homeless units and the other one being for chronically homeless. And so those two are different. Chronically homeless does apply more to PSH, whereas homeless, so the project can serve homeless units and does not necessarily have to meet the higher or more stringent standard of the chronically homeless definition. So be aware that those are two separate things. With that, yeah, I'll let Dana take over. And
Sure. Okay, so like Ed has said, we've got our PSH or Permanent Supportive Housing Rental Assistance and Services funding available in this NOFA. I believe we've got 25 slots available. Slots just means you get the services funding per unit and then the rental assistance. So basically 25 units worth of PSH available in this NOFA. And so you can request these resources through your development request in your application. To do so, you need to complete your PSH services plan by basically talking about your PSH program within the resident services description in the application. It's pretty clear on each of the resident services focus question. There's a directive to describe your PSH element if that's applicable to you. We also ask that you provide a PSH services budget. This is one of the tabs in the application. We provide a template that we want you to fill out so we can see that your request, how your request is going to be used for the PSH program. And also we want to see an evidence of a committed service provider. We want to see that the service provider knows that they're going to be doing PSH for the long term and show that they understand what that commitment looks like. That can be like a letter of support or a memorandum of understanding that you have with the service provider. Anything that shows long-term commitment and a clear understanding of what they're signing up for. And so PSH units, for some programmatic requirements, they must provide on-site tenancy support services. So the PSH services dollars should be paying for the appropriate level of staffing for the number of units that you have. We do require a ratio of at least one supportive service staff per 15 households. So that ratio should be adhered to in your program design. And also we require that you serve households experiencing chronic homelessness. We defer to your local continuum of care for that chronic homelessness definition. So whoever your local homelessness system, your region's homelessness system is identifying as the most vulnerable persons experiencing long-term homelessness, that's who we expect these funds to house. The units that are PSH must be filled through your local coordinated entry system. Obviously, it gets a little gray in more rural areas. We want to see that you're at least talking to your COC technically there is coordinated entry everywhere, just it's not as far along. So we just want to see those connections, and we want to hear about a referral process that is equitable, and if it is designed to address racial disparity that exists in access to PSH, we're open to that as well. But the rule is coordinated entry is what you must use unless you can show that that's just not appropriate. We do set rent and income limits at 60% AMI for PSH units. So that means we pay up to the 60% AMI amount for the rental assistance, and residents will pay 30% of their income, and we pay that difference between that amount and the 60% rent amount. So yeah, rental assistance is provided at that rate of the HUD Light Tech 60% AMI rent amount, and we cap our services funding at $10,000 per unit per year. So that's how you can calculate your maximum request for PSH services in that services budget tab. Yeah, and I can answer any questions you might have.
There we go. Sorry. And I was going to say, and we'll also still have a more question period towards the end as well. So moving along, go ahead and talk through the Nofa application process, the submission process. So OHCS has sent welcome emails to the Proquorum work centers. You should have gained a link to get in there and create your login credentials. If you haven't done that already with another project. And again, you should have access to Proquorum work centers for your submitted project by now. If you don't, please reach out and let us know as soon as possible. The full Nofa application and supplemental docs are in your work center. That's where you will receive those, download them, fill them out for submission later. This year, I'm going to brag about it. Let's see if I can go back. We only have 2 supplemental documents. Over time, we've been working on getting them incorporated into the application so that there's just a Nofa and an application. And it's, yeah, I think it's awesome. It used to be we had as many as, I want to say 10 or 12 supplementals, and it was a little bit hairy, keeping them all straight with all of the submissions, in addition to everything else that you have to submit that's not a supplemental. So it just made it really difficult. So I like that. There's really only one supplemental. It is your zoning form that you need to have signed and filled in by your local planning office. Other than that, the other one is a real estate holdings format. Basically, you don't even have to use it. It's just if you don't know, have any other format that you're aware of that you can use that as a guide, or just copy it entirely. During this application time period, I just want you to understood that you have limited permissions, meaning that really you can only download and upload. Otherwise, it's a glorified Dropbox. If the project is awarded later on, your permissions will change, and you'll see that. And I would encourage you to reinvestigate your work center. There's actually quite a few tools in there that both OHCS will use and that you can use that help with task management. But you don't have access to those at this time. To submit, you upload your application and supplemental documents and required documents, all the required evidence to the final application folder in your work center. And here I can even highlight. I went ahead and did a little screen grab here, but yeah, this year, again, another thing that's made it so much easier is we only have 2 folders in your work center. There's the final application, and then performance manuals and supplementals. So your pre-application and those documents are in this folder, as well as manuals and forms and things for you to find for your final submission. When it goes to comes time for you to upload your final application and your required forms and everything, they all just get dropped whole hog into your final application folder so that they're all in one spot, easy to find. We ask that you please do try to use the naming conventions that we came up with in the instructions tab of the application. That helps us find your documentation quicker because we kind of know what we're looking for. It's not something that will totally derail your application if you don't So don't worry about that in those terms. So please do try your best. And yeah, it's not make or break, but the better you do on that, the easier it is for us. We appreciate it. With that said, let's see, if awarded, Work Center will stay active through the project development life cycle. True. So instead of getting a new Work Center, basically it'll kind of get upgraded. And then you'll have access to all those other tools I mentioned. So tasks, submissions, timelines, and messages. Turn that off. Next slide. Okay. So this is a screen grab. I went ahead and just jumped into one of the, oh, and actually I still have their name up there in the top left. That is one of the applicants of this. But aside from that, this is what your Work Center should look like. Just these two folders, your final application, and then another folder for forms, manuals, and supplementals. And then I went ahead and just jumped into the forms, manuals, and supplementals. Again, there's a couple other folders in here, but really manuals is just manuals of the program. So like General Housing Account Program, which is funding this NOFA. The manual for that program is in there, as well as a few other manuals and documents for your reference. Your own pre-application submissions in the pre-application. The full application for you to fill out, the template, the blank template for that's in the application folder. Let me grab my highlighter here again. You can see here, this one, that just lets you know there's one document inside there, and there's no additional folders inside this folder. Under manuals, you can see there's 10 documents or PDFs or whatever kind of file format is in that folder. Just a little bit more background to kind of help you understand what you're seeing there. You can see that you can even make comments on individual documents. So there's quite a few tools. I don't know if you have access to that quite yet, but you can see that there are no comments on it. There's only one version of it. Taking this back to something I mentioned earlier, if you are to re-upload your application or any other document, if you submit it with the same name, here's where you can tell that there was an older upload. We have access to go and look at older uploads, although we're not necessarily interested in that. It's there for the record. But we do prefer that you just upload the same file with the same file name instead of versioning it. It's cleaner this way, where we kind of just we're able to update the record. And again, we're only concerned with your latest upload. And that's the one that we're concerned with reviewing for scoring. So as a matter of strategy, and I'll reiterate this, you can upload your application early on, at least, by default, you've got something for submission. As you continue to make updates, maybe towards the end, you can re-upload that same file. It'll get a new iteration stacked on top here. All we will see when we click on this link is the latest and greatest. For the record, the older copies will be there, but for most purposes, it won't really be regarded. All right, moving on. The NOFA application process and the full application overview. In general, the full application is an Excel workbook. It is a workbook with many worksheets. I've found that most people refer to them as tabs. So just understand that you could either consider it a tab or a worksheet. Technically, Microsoft Office calls it a worksheet. But again, most people call them tabs. That's because our web browsers use the term tabs, and they're very similar. And one's a lot more common than the other. We have a new color scale this year. And yeah, I'm proud of this. I think this is one of the things that I complained a lot about on your behalf. We had 6 color schemes that were redundant and also so similar in hue that you could hardly discern them apart. We've dropped it down to 4. It's a little better. The unrestricted answer this is technically a light blue, although on my screen it still looks white. But the unrestricted answer is a little bit of a misnomer. Technically, if it's like your phone number that we want you to fill in, it'll be restricted to numeric values only. You can't enter any alphabetic values there. So it's not exactly unrestricted in all of these, but the point is we want you to put a value here. If it's this blue color, this aqua color, then there will be a selection for you in a drop down to enter. And then we have the do not enter and the auto populate. So that's kind of how that works. If you have any questions about that, feel free to stop me. But this application auto populates many fields, both for our use and yours. Within these scoring tabs, for this NOFA, those tabs are colored green, so you can see them pretty easily because they're pretty distinct. They've just stuck that way. In all other NOFA, I think they're still blue. They got a military green because this is the veterans NOFA, and that's just never changed back. But I like it that way because I think it's easier to find. The scoring tabs will auto-populate many of the scores that are able to be tabulated by the application. And so they will give you a value that you can see. If you feel that for any reason there's an error in those calculations, definitely reach out and let us know about it. We'll have a look at it, and either if there's something wrong, we'll get it fixed, or if we're seeing that it's calculated correctly, we'll explain why we feel that that's the correct value. Do review the instructions tab. That's that first sheet. They are different NOFA to NOFA, and they do have important information that's in them for full submission. So I always encourage people not to just kind of gloss over that. It is important and it is useful. It's been bloated in past years. It's another thing that I've personally tried to get into and I have that really pared down to what has to be there. In the past, we've had these applications for what we termed as smart docked. In 2022, they're not smart docked. This actually makes this a lot simpler process for both of us. Smart docking may come back in the future. It's just we're not at a point right now where we can use that capability intelligently. So, or in an advantageous way is maybe a better word. So we've just gotten rid of that aspect. What that meant in the past was if you made a copy of your application and submitted that copy, it would break the whole system. That's not the case anymore. It's your application is not tied directly to your work center or your ProLink deal in our system. I guess I'll try not to get too much into that. Basically, it's easier and you don't have to worry about the smart docking issues that we've had in the past. Let's see. And by applying, you agree by electronic signature to all the terms and conditions in the NOFA application. So that's, I don't think I get into that in another tab. So let me stop here and I'll explain this. In the application, there are a couple of tabs where we ask you to more or less sign. Really is just typing in your name. That is an electronic signature. And by submission of the application, that is sufficient for agreeing to and signing those pages that we ask you to sign. Some applicants have printed out those pages, physically sign them, scan them, and then upload them. We'll accept that. That's not necessary. Thank you. But we'd actually prefer that you just type in the responsible party's name in those fields, and our Department of Justice has said that is sufficient for the electronic signature for the use in which we've created it. All right, and then let me go over the application charge submission, because this can get a little bit confusing. And yeah, we don't want folks to get too confused by this. And so please ask questions if you have any. But what you will do is within your application, let me pull out my highlighter again. You will navigate to this tab, the application charge transmittal tab. You can submit you can fill out these blue fields first. You can fill out basically this whole form and then print it. Then what you will do is with this printed form, submit your application fee to the address that's listed on this transmittal form, and address it appropriately. Our whole process for this has kind of gotten a little bit complicated. Our finance department is not even in the same building as our department. So these checks are going someplace else. to a department that deals with our entire department, not just the rental housing division. So it's important that we get this routed correctly so that it's processed timely and that we understand that you've paid the application charge. So by saying attention finance and by submitting it with this form, it'll make it to finance, which is who has to receive it. They'll see this form and they'll know who is applicable to, and they'll make sure that we're notified. So please follow those instructions. And that's why we have this process. It's a necessary evil. All right. Nofa application process, administrative and threshold review. I can go more into detail on any of these pieces if you have any questions on them. But otherwise, I'll kind of just briefly describe that once you've submitted your application, prior to the application being scored, according to section 3, we go through and we review that the application is fully submitted. And we have certain items that we simply feel that we have to have in order to score an application, or before we can even get to scoring, we have to make sure that it's substantially submitted. And so these are the items that we review and check through to make sure that it has met the administrative and threshold review. Once we've determined that the application is complete and that it is eligible to pass on to scoring, then we'll go ahead and submit it to our scoring committees to go through the scoring process and provide the applicant or the project a score. All right, scoring overview. So there are 100 maximum possible points for applications to be eligible for a reservation. We've come up with a minimum point value of 60. So even in rural, as an example, this time, it's undersubscribed. We need those applications in rural to score at least 60 points in order for us to feel that we can provide a reservation of funds for that project. So we have a minimum standard, even if those funds are not competitive. In the scoring process, there's sort of a waterfall of what we go by. So first, we rank and score projects by region. Then we review the score for each of those projects within those regions. And then we award projects for as long as we have funding available in that region. After that point, then funds are then released into essentially a general bucket. And then we re-review again by score and by funds available. And then if necessary, we get into the tie-breaking rules that are within the NOFA to try and break those ties. The same points are available through urban and rural. There are some slight differences in the location efficiency points, but otherwise both regions in this NOFA are the same. During the scoring process, we get together groups of scorers, both internally and externally, to make sure that we've got at least a number of eyes on each scoring category to make sure that we're being objective, unbiased, and that we're not missing anything. And then, not that this really matters a whole lot to you, but all categories are an up to amount. So it can be anywhere from 0 to 1, 2, 3. Each scoring category, you'll see exactly how that breaks out. Sometimes we'll have it where it be like 0, 2, or 4. We might not have the in-between points, but that'll be stipulated in each category. And then we only award whole points as another thing that we don't ever give like a 1.3 points to a project. That's just gotten, we've just decided as a matter of practice that it's not as easily defensible when we go to report those out. So we just stick to whole points. All right, and then coming into scoring criteria. How am I doing on time? I feel like I'm going a little bit slow. I apologize. Financial this year is substantially the same. The points are still 10 points as they were last year. As you read through the criteria for financial scoring, essentially this category is scored by our by our production analysts. They review the application and the performa in its entirety. So it's not just the performa areas of the application. They can use any part of the application that they need to kind of tie in any facts of what's in the financials, but ultimately they do live primarily in the performa. Resident services description is 20 points again this year. The points breakout, I think the points have shifted in some questions, but otherwise this area is 20 points. This is scored through the narrative section that is inside of the application this year. Last year it was a separate supplemental. This year is inside the application. I believe it's the area in which you provide these narratives is inside the scoring tab. One item of note, the resident services description within the competitive scoring portion of this is different than the resident services description form that we have you sign after the project, or not sign, but fill out after the project has been awarded. MWSB is going to be 5 points this year. I think that may actually be 1 point higher, or maybe the same as last year. The information about MWSB is somewhat updated this year. It's substantially the same, but the language has been updated just to be a little better written. It's always kind of a moving target. So I think year over year, we've kind of made improvements into how we're getting at what it is that we're looking for. Location efficiency is different than last year. It's 1 point, actually, I think it's several points less than it was last year. But each category is up to 1 point. I think last year each category was up to potential 2 points. And there was a fifth category. So I think location efficiency last year was 10 points. This year it's just 4. For each of these, it's mostly just self-reported. And what we do is we go ahead and then verify. So a lot of the legwork of discovering what is in and around the project is on the applicant. What we'll do then is just verify that what you're submitting is true and accurate. The one that's kind of tricky is food access. What you'll do is you'll head to that link that I've also shared here. It's inside the application. You can actually click the hyperlink that's right there in that scoring category under the scoring tab. It'll take you to that map. What I'd like to do is actually, I want to share this process because it can be somewhat tricky. And I have it pulled up. I'm prepared to, so give me just a moment. I wish I was faster at this. All right, I'm going to share this screen now. All right, that link takes you to this page, and before it will pop up, before I get too far ahead, either Dana or Martin, are you seeing map of Oregon with these blue splotches?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. It won't show you this right away. You'll have to type in an address. I went ahead and typed in OHCS's headquarters. And then when you come over here on the left-hand side, you come down to critical service gaps, and you're going to go ahead and select food desert, and that will pop this up. And so basically, either your project is inside a blue area, which means that it will get no points, or your project is outside of a blue area, which means it will get 1 point. I will add the caveat that we reserve some discretion for some common sense. If your project is inside of a blue area but it actually turns out that there's a Walmart supercenter in its backyard, you can submit that to us either through the FAQ or in the application and appeal for that point, and we will review that. We don't really generally consider mini marts to be making up for that. It really has to either be, an actual grocery store. Otherwise, as I said, if it's in this blue area, then it will get no points for that category. Go back to sharing. Let's see if I get this right. It looks like I'm sharing not quite the correct thing. Are you all seeing the PowerPoint slide, or are you just seeing the office? version of it? Either Martin or,
I see it.
okay, you're just seeing the slide presentation?
Nope, we got, you need to relaunch the slide presentation.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. I'll try this. Unshare and then reshare. What's going on here? No, it's still on that window. I'm going to, sorry, bear with me. Stop sharing. And I'm going to. Oh, that's right. Okay. I have to share this and then I have to swap these pages. There it is. Sorry for this. There we go. All right. If you have a scattered site, it'll be by the weighted average of units. So if you've got, one site that gets the point and one site that doesn't, whichever site has the most units will get the point or not get the point. And if they're tied, we'll have to deal with that on a case-by-case basis. Yeah, if you actually had that scenario, then you've broken the whole system. No, I'm just kidding. Please submit that to the FAQs and ask us which way you think that would go. And then that way we can address that issue before the NOFA closes. But if you don't, then we'll probably err on the side of giving the point to the project. All right. Community need is a narrative response. You will find that in the scoring tab under narrative scoring. You'll submit your response to that to be scored. Collaboration, project design, barrier reduction, same thing. There will be a narrative box for you to fill out in the narrative scoring tab. Just submit your response to those questions as they're posed in the NOFA, and they will be scored by our scoring committees. Automated scoring. So the application will automatically score the averaged affordability, the focus on serving homeless veterans, and the lower subsidy per unit requests. If you would like to go ahead and review how the application is tallying those, and if you feel that there's any discrepancy, again, feel welcome to go ahead and challenge that or ask about it in the FAQs. And then, as I said, if there is an error, we'll get that resolved. And otherwise, we'll go ahead and explain why we feel that's being calculated correctly. And then development team capacity. This is primarily scored through your responses and in the narratives that you supply in the application as well. All right. Then readiness to proceed. What we're using to qualify those is what you see in the NOFA. So there's actually a robust list of bullets that we're using to determine readiness to proceed. And then tribal participation, again, read the NOFA, how that is defined, because it's a little bit tricky. So I won't even attempt to try and paraphrase it. But if the project is partnering with a tribal entity, then potentially the project could receive an additional 2 points. Also, for any project that has already attended the OHCS PSH Institute, they may not be the case for any of the applicants in this pool for this NOFA. So potentially it would be a maximum of 98 points instead of 100 for any applicants in this NOFA. I don't know for sure if that is or isn't, but I have a feeling that no one is actually eligible for that this round. And then lastly, wildfire disaster area. So here's a little screen grab of those disaster areas in which we were qualifying. There is a link in the NOFA and also in the application for you to follow to get more information about how many points your project would potentially qualify for. If you have any questions about that, submit them to the FAQ, because it does get a little bit tricky and I'm not the expert on being able to define exactly who's eligible for which points. So if your project is in one of those areas and you would like assistance in figuring out exactly where it falls in that, submit that to the FAQ. All right, and then lastly, this is sort of just a reestablishing or reiterating our FAQ process. I always like to give sort of background. I think it helps people understand where and why and what we're doing with this. We have in the past, we've even had a position within OHCS. It was called like called them RADs. It was like a rural area or no, regional area, some sort of advising position. Even after those positions went away, there was some concern by an applicant that information wasn't being disseminated equitably. And so since that time, we have used the FAQ process to make sure that any responses that we're giving out are the same responses we're giving to everyone so that everyone can benefit from the same answers. And that way it's just a fairer process. So that's why there's kind of the rigmarole behind, if you call us, if you email us individually, we're going to redirect you to the FAQ. We'll take in the question, we'll, if needed, sterilize it, but everyone will be given the same answer back. And again, that way everyone has access to fairly and equitably the same responses. Otherwise, because it is possible one person could give information in a slightly different way than another person, even though they're kind of answering the same question. We just want to make sure that what we're giving is the same information to everyone at the same time. All right, with that, if anyone has any questions that they'd like to go through, be happy to entertain them. Otherwise, please use the FAQ process. So I'll say if neither one of you has any additional questions for right now, then we'll go ahead
Actually,
and-
I do.
Okay.
I was just trying to think of how to word it.
Yeah, no problem.
My boss has a Procorum account for past NOFAs that he's been awarded. I think the original person that was added to the work center to manage those grants has passed away. And so I'm wondering, will my boss, is he able to add me to the work center as a somebody that
Contributor.
like,
So no, he won't be able to do that directly himself. You do have to request to have you added to those work centers. And I had forgotten about that. Actually, I remember he had mentioned that he wanted you added to those. I do need specifically to know which projects. So if you can actually send me, you can send this directly to me because it's not related to the Nofa. If you can send me an email.
okay.
With which projects you want to be added to, I can go about helping you settle that.
Okay. And then my last question is, at the end of the cycle, when you guys have made the committee's made their decision and we're notified, do you guys give like constructive criticism to the grant writers? Because I would love to know how I could do better, because I'm a grant writer, but never before in this industry. And it's just so different. So
Yeah.
I would love to know, at the end of it, like what could have been done differently, or I would love to receive critique for future projects. Do you guys do that?
We do, yeah, we have a system for that. I'm trying to remember what we call it. I wouldn't call it criticism, but we do give a readout or report out on how the project scored, so that you'll know which areas the project had scored well, which areas the project hadn't scored quite as high. And we do try to share some of the feedback, especially in areas where maybe scorers were more critical on score, just so you have an idea of maybe why some of those points weren't fully awarded.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you can't think of any other questions, then as I said, still plenty of time. You can always ask and use the FAQ process, and we'll take this recording and we'll post it online. All right. Well, thanks everyone, and look forward to seeing everybody's applications at the end of this. Stop recording.